So this video is actually about fishing and aquaculture. We won't worry about the forestry stuff. It's already on a PowerPoint we've already talked about. So we're just going to go through a few slides. The big question that we're trying to answer is whether or not fishing is actually sustainable within Canada. So we're going to take a look at some pictures and some facts, and there's a video I need you to watch about whether or not fishing is sustainable, and then you're going to decide for yourself at the end. So if it's sustainable, if it's not, could it possibly be in the future, and so on. So during this time, you need to be taking notes on the different slides, and I should pause long enough, or you can always go back and review the PowerPoint by itself if you need to create your notes. So what is aquaculture? Basically, this is the idea of farming in the sea. So it's kind of neat because like you would set up pens with animals inside of them on land in a regular farm with like pigs and chickens and so on. You can actually do the same type of thing out in the water, and this is very important out on the west coast. So in this picture here, this overhead picture, this would be an area where, oops, click back over here, within each of these little pens, they would have a group of fish. And so the farmer would come out here, and then they would again have different types of fish in here too, and they would feed the fish, and the fish would reproduce, and when they get to a certain size, then they would be harvested. So this is what it looks like from the side. So it's a very controlled environment. The fisherman is able to give them antibiotics to make sure that they're growing to the appropriate size. They're not getting sick from anything that might be traveling by in the water, like algae or any other type of sickness that might be polluting the water. So again, this is what it looks like. It can be seen as sustainable because if we know that there's 3 fish in here and we don't take all 3 of them, we take out 1, then 2 of them can continue to reproduce. So that's one concept of whether or not it's sustainable. Some people say that if you ever have aquaculture salmon, they say it doesn't taste necessarily as good as wild salmon because they're less aggressive because they're caught inside here. I don't know, that has something to do with flavor apparently. I don't know an awful lot about seafood myself, but they say the wild ones taste better. I don't know why. So commercial farming, or sorry, commercial fishing, pretty much the same thing as commercial farming. So this is where people are actually going out to fish in order to make a profit. So the idea is not you going out on the weekend with one little fishing pole with your parents and seeing what you can get. This is actually people out there with very large boats and nets, and they are trawling for large shipments. You probably see commercials about this on the Discovery Channel, or you might watch some videos on the Discovery Channel as well, because depending on where you're fishing and what type of catch you're looking for, it can be quite dangerous because people sometimes go out for very long periods of time, like maybe about 2 weeks or so out on a ship to catch a very particular type of thing and then bring it back to the shore. So here's some examples of large boats that would have that, and they can sometimes scoop them out from here and decide if there's anything worthwhile. Anything that's not worthwhile is referred to as the bycatch here, and that gets thrown back into the water. So it might be dead by the time it gets thrown back in, so that's something that's not necessarily very good about commercial fishing. Can disrupt the ecosystem depending on whether or not other types of fish come along and eat it, but a lot of times animals like their prey to be active and moving around, so they're not very happy to go after dead fish. So it can interact inappropriately with the ecosystem. So there's 2 types of fishing. There's inshore fishing, which is relatively close to the shore, less than probably about 200 kilometers or so offshore. So these people, they go out very early in the morning and then they come back in the late afternoon, and a lot of times they have a family farm and they sell their catch locally at a market, or they might sell it to local restaurants in their neighborhood. And so they have fairly small fishing boats. And then the opposite is large shore, offshore vessels. So the seagulls are really enjoying the fact that they have a huge catch probably on board. And these types of vessels, they have lots and lots of people working on them, and they go out for, these are the ones that go for maybe 2 weeks at a time and come back with a very large catch. So there's different methods of fishing, and you can decide for yourself which one would be the best or the most sustainable, kind of like when we talked about forestry and the differences there. So this one is long lining. So basically, the boat over here drops a very long line that has different little strips coming off of it with hooks, and then they have buoys up along the top so the fisherman knows where they have placed their line, so it's got a little flag on it. And then at the end, they go and they put some kind of a bait on the end of the hook that the fish are going to like, and then whatever comes by that bites onto it, that's what ends up getting caught. So it sits sometimes on the bottom of the ocean floor, or can just kind of hang in between the ocean bottom and the surface. So the fish actually come to the line, and it only works though if there happen to be fish that are in the area. So it doesn't, this type of thing doesn't work if there aren't any fish in the neighborhood. It's non-discriminatory. And non-discriminatory, here, non-discriminatory means that whatever happens to chomp onto the bottom of that line, that's what ends up getting eaten. So nothing, it's not only tuna is going to go after this. So in this case, you can see you can end up with like sea turtles might get caught on this line, and that's not something that we have a market for. So if that creature dies on the line, then we've just wasted, a piece of the ecosystem, and it gets thrown back as part of the bycatch. So not necessarily the best thing. Again, always thinking about sustainability and trying to connect this with sustainability, and you're making the decisions about that. So the next method of fishing is called gill netting. So a line is dropped from a boat. This is kind of similar in that it's got buoys up along the top here, so little floaty things that keep the top portion of the net so that it's near the surface, and along the bottom, these little black dots here, these are actually weights. So it keeps it stretched out nicely, and it builds like a little fence. So basically any fish that go by here, if they don't see it, and they may not see it, they'll get stuck. So they'll try and go through the little square, and then they'll actually get caught, and their fins will get, or their gills will get caught. So when they try and back up, they would either rip off their gills, or they just die there because they give up. So any fish that is big enough to get stuck gets trapped. So again, it's kind of non-discriminatory as well. Some people say this is fairly inhumane because of the possibility if the fish freaks out and tries to back up, it could rip off a piece of itself. But the good thing about it that people like is that it's easily transported. So once the fisherman's ready to go, he can pull up the line here at the end, they pull in the whole thing, and then they just take the fish off, and then they're ready to move on to a new area. So last possibility here is trawling method, and this one you can if you think back to Simpsons had an episode about Little Lisa Slurry, where they were rolling in the net and it was bringing in everything, and it was non-discriminatory as well. This is the same type of thing. So you've got a boat, and it basically makes like a big hoop here with a type of net, and then the boat moves very, very slowly, and it drags the net along behind it, but it scoops along the bottom of the ocean floor, and it picks up anything that's in the way. So again, this is called, it's non-discriminatory. But the interesting thing is they can use fish sonar to find out where schools of fish are, and then they can go and drop a net in that neighborhood. And because they're moving so slowly, the fish aren't really smart, and so they will kind of make their way into the net here without even noticing that they're being circled, and then by the time that the whole school of fish is in here, people can bring the net up, and then they have a whole school of fish. This is a more humane method because the fish don't freak out. Obviously, they die because this is a resource for us, but at least they're not ripping off their gills. And some people might say that this might be maybe a bit more sustainable. So I'm going to stop there. There's a couple more things on here about writing a proper paragraph, but I'm going to leave that alone. If you want to take a look at that on a PowerPoint, you can certainly do that, but you've been very good recently with writing short answer questions. So I'm going to stop here. So knowing the three main types of fishing and just understanding the difference between longshore fishing and inshore fishing, and trying to connect this with sustainability. So looking at these fishing types and then comparing that as well with aquaculture, you need to make the decision about whether or not fishing is a sustainable activity.